The Klone-It restoration process. Before starting, it is very important to understand that Klone-It does not remove scratches. For more information on scratch removal from granite as well as engineered stone, and tips and tricks to improve the scratch removal process, ask your local tool supplier for a copy of Alpha Professional Tools video on granite scratch removal. In addition to the 4 Klone-It bottles, 1 to 4, you will need to provide the following items: a grinder polisher, 3 wool buffing pads, 1 felt pad, a bottle with water, a bottle with acetone, and 8 clean cotton cloths. The grinder we are using for both the scratch removal and for the surface restoration is a Makita 9565 variable speed grinder. You can also use a standard air wet polisher. With this said, let's begin to do a repair. Once the scratch has been completely removed from a damaged section of engineered stone, then the Klone-It surface restoration process begins. We have chosen one of the most difficult colors, Zodiac's Black Noir, to demonstrate Klone-It's ability to restore the surface finish. In addition, we have created an extreme condition with very deep scratches. Using a coarse cup grinding wheel, we have scratched the engineered stone surface. Beginning with the deeply scratched surface, we polish the area to remove the scratches. The apparent result looks like the scratches were removed and the surface looks like the original stone. On closer inspection, with different lighting and viewing angles, the repaired area is still visible and doesn't match the factory finish. Before beginning, there are several do's and don'ts that need to be mentioned. 1. Do not mix chemistries. To ensure that each of the 4 Klone-It compounds do not intermix, use a separate pad for each step. As pads can be reused, number the back of each pad with a permanent marker. Number 2. When checking as well as completing each step, use 1 cloth per compound when removing excess compound. 3. Use a separate cloth when applying acetone. 4. Set your grinder at around 3000 RPMs. This speed seems to work best. 5. Always begin by shaking each bottle well. Shaking assures that the compound is thoroughly mixed and that nothing has settled to the bottom of the bottle. 6. Should any of the compounds appear to be too thick, add a little water and mix in completely by shaking vigorously. Generally, Klone-It 3 tends to become thick and pasty. Ideally, Klone-It 3 should be as thick or slightly thicker than the other Klone-It components. If any of the Klone-It components become the consistency of paste, they are too thick. If they become the consistency of water, they are much too thin. The ideal consistency is like a thick shampoo or thick hand lotion. 7. To avoid damaging the engineered stone, always keep the grinder moving and always keep the surface lightly covered with water. 8. To get the best results, do not skip or rush through any of the 4 steps. Shortcutting a step only saves a little time and takes away from the quality of the end result. Before starting step 1, the restoring of the surface texture, we check the buffing pad to make sure that we have a clean pad and that it is free from any dried Klone-It 1 compound that may have remained on the pad from its previous use. We remove any remaining residue by hand and then by shaking the pad. With the number 1 wool buffing pad on the grinder, check to make sure that the grinder speed has been turned down to around 3000 RPM. Shake Klone-It 1 vigorously for about 30 seconds to a minute, depending on the amount of time from the last use. The less frequent between uses, the more mixing time is required. Apply a small amount of Klone-It 1 onto the repaired surface. Spread the compound with the buffer. Begin by working the surface with the grinder running dry. Use an even motion with light, uniform pressure, and work up and down, back and forth, diagonally, and in a random circular motion. Always keep the grinder moving so that you do not burn the stone. As the material dries, apply more Klone-It 1 and continue buffing. Should the Klone-It 1 become dry, lightly spray with water as needed and continue buffing. After a few minutes, stop, wash the area with water, and wipe away Klone-It 1, and then dry the area. Visually inspect the surface and compare it to the surrounding texture. Continue with Klone-It 1 until you can see that the texture in the repaired area matches the factory's surface texture of the surrounding material. You are not done until the texture in the worked area matches the factory finish. This is critical and must be followed. As you can see, we start and stop several times to check our progress. When done, we use water to help remove excess material and clean the pad. Finally, using a clean cloth with acetone, wipe the engineered stone surface to remove any remaining Klone-It 1. Change to pad number 2 and Klone-It 2. Step 2 is for the removal of the swirl marks in the engineered stone. Shake the bottle of Klone-It 2 well. Apply a small amount of Klone-It 2 to the work area. As in step 1, begin by working the surface with the grinder running dry. Use an even motion with light uniform pressure. Always keep the grinder moving so that you do not burn the stone. Should the Klone-It 2 become dry, lightly spray with water as needed. Continue buffing. After a few minutes, wipe away Klone-It 2 and then dry. Visually inspect the surface and compare it to the surrounding factory finish. Like before, several applications of Klone-It 2 may be necessary to achieve the desired result. When done, use water to help remove excess material and clean the pad. Finally, using a clean cloth with acetone, wipe the engineered stone surface to remove any remaining Klone-It 2. Step 3. Removing the swirl marks imparted to the quartz with Klone-It 3. The third step is the removal of the swirl marks in the quartz crystals using Klone-It 3. It is similar to steps 1 and 2 with some major exceptions. First, we change from the wool buffing pad to a felt pad and a rigid backing pad. As Klone-It 3 tends to become very pasty over time, have the water bottle handy. Shake the bottle of Klone-It 3 extremely well. Apply a small amount of Klone-It 3 to the work area. If Klone-It 3 isn't similar in consistency to Klone-Its 1 and 2, lightly spray with water. With Klone-It 3, protect the area from the material being slung. Klone-It 3 tends to dry quickly. Add more water and continue buffing. As in steps 1 and 2, begin by working the surface with the grinder running dry. Use an even motion with light uniform pressure. Always keep the grinder moving so that you don't burn the stone. As Klone-It starts to dry, mist with water and continue buffing. Be careful not to use too much water and make the compound too thin. Buff for about 3 minutes total and check your progress. Visually inspect the surface and compare it to the surrounding factory finish. Continue until you have achieved a shine matching the quartz on the surrounding surface of the engineered stone. Finally, using a clean cloth and water, wipe the engineered stone surface to remove any remaining Klone-It 3. Change from the felt pad back to the number 4 wool pad and appropriate backer. The final step is to restore the gloss to the surface with Klone-It 4. Shake the bottle of Klone-It 4 well. Apply a small amount of Klone-It 4 to the work area. As in the previous steps, begin by working the surface with the grinder running dry. Use an even motion with light uniform pressure. Keep the grinder moving so that you do not burn the stone. Should Klone-It 4 become dry, lightly spray with water as needed. Continue buffing. After a few minutes, wipe away Klone-It 4 and then dry. Visually inspect the surface and compare it to the surrounding factory finish. 1 to 3 applications of Klone-It 4 may be necessary to achieve the desired result. When done, use water to help remove excess material and clean the pad. Finally, using a clean cloth with acetone, wipe the engineered stone surface to remove any remaining Klone-It. Final inspection. Move around the piece and visually inspect the repaired area under different lighting conditions and at different viewing angles. When you can't see a difference, congratulations! You have successfully made the repair. One final comment. The slab of engineered stone used in this repair demonstration has 2 saw cuts in the material above the repaired area. As you can see, it is visible from various angles throughout the video. The video was not doctored and the final finish shown was achieved in the same stone we started with. Although a very close inspection with the trained critical eye may detect imperfections in the repair, the results surpasses all other products in the market today. More importantly, there is no topical coating used to achieve the final results.